Welcome everybody to this event, our first ever live stream discussion with CWS State Exhibition's juror, Sterling Edwards. This will be recorded, so if you weren't able to come live, this will be recorded and put on our YouTube channel, which is called You Are an Artist. And we really are adhering to the mantra of trying to bring arts and art making to people who might not think of themselves as an artist, and just try and inspire people to act more creatively and artistically in their everyday lives and their everyday activities. I think there's a lot to be said for things that people do that they might not consider to be art, and I think that thinking of it in that way can really help you enjoy things a little bit more. This is kind of the mantra of our YouTube channel, and we're going to be working towards that goal with all the content that we post. We've done interviews so far. We've done some artist demonstrations. We're going to be doing a live music series here soon, concert series. It's going to be shot right inside of our empty gallery. We're going to be doing all kinds of stuff to try and reach out to you guys while you can't come and see us in our doors, or if you're not able to make it here in person. So Sterling, can we just start by giving a little background on who you are and what it is you do and your expertise?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all tonight, and I want to welcome everybody as well. I'm a professional artist. I've been a full-time artist for about 30 years, and prior to that, I was a part-time artist for probably about 30 years. So I've been painting almost my entire life. And what I do right now is I've written a book several years ago, which is now out of print. I'm trying to see if they won't do a second printing of that book. But I do art instructional videos. I travel internationally doing art workshops, and all over the U.S. doing art workshops. And I do pieces in my studio, of course, for galleries. And I'm actually, believe it or not, everybody thinks being a full-time artist is kind of a pie job, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And anybody that's ever tried to do it can attest to that, because I'm convinced that being creative is 25% of it, and marketing is the other 75%.
Nothing worth doing is easy.
It's not as easy as people think it is. It takes constant work. It's a 7-day-a-week job. I love it. I totally love it. And for those of you who know me, I spent 20 years as a firefighter and a police officer prior to going full-time as an artist. So this is a big difference from what I used to do for a living. At least in this job, I'm not being shot at or having to run into a burning building, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a little safer.
A little safer. My biggest fear is falling on a brush and impaling myself. So that could happen too. But,
yeah, and you'd probably get over it,
I'll get over it. Band-Aids.
Yeah.
So it's a great job. I work from my home studio. I'm filming right now from my home studio. And I think I've got just what I consider to be a pretty nice gig, because I'm doing something I love to do. And it is hard work, but it's work that I love doing. I actually look forward to going to work every day, because every day is a new experience. Learning new technology, like I'm doing right now with this. Learning how to film videos. We're going to start doing some online digital classes, and I hope, if I can get the technology worked out. So it's a great job. I also jury a lot of shows. I jury at least 2 or 3 shows a year. Some of them are national, some of them are international, and regional shows. And that's something I'm always very honored to do. I was very honored to do the jurying for this show. It was a great show, by the way. I want to commend everybody that put a piece in. It was a fantastic show. I
think we have a lot of people featured in that show in the chat right now.
Oh, good.
Right now. So congratulations to all of you that were accepted into CWS. And I'm sure that the job of jurying it wasn't easy.
It's not an easy job. It's never easy to jury a show, because you know that every single person put their best work in. And a lot of the pieces, they're all beautiful to a certain degree. And some people are more skilled than others. Some people have different ways of approaching their craft, which is what I really like about it. We're not all painting the same thing. And that's one thing I find very interesting about art is 10 artists can paint the same tree, and there's 10 different interpretations. And that's what really first turned me on to art when I was very young, and just got me excited about it. But this particular show, if you've seen the show, then you realize that I deliberately mixed it up as far as the genre, as far as techniques. And I do this for a very specific reason, because I was a photorealist for about 25 years. I did absolute pinpoint realism. And then I finally just got kind of tired of doing that, so I branched out and learned how to paint in kind of a loose and impressionistic style. I did that for several years, and then I went into abstraction, which I'm into right now. And so I love everything from realism to abstract and everything in between. So I can really appreciate what goes into each piece. I don't care if I'm looking at a piece of abstract expressionism, or I'm looking at a portrait, or I'm looking at a landscape, whether it be realistic or impressionistic. I know what it took for that artist to create that piece of art, because I've been there and done that. So I've got a lot of appreciation for it. And one thing I do in a jury is I deliberately mix it all up so it's not showing any kind of bias or prejudice towards or against one specific subject or style as opposed to the others.
Yeah.
So, and it's a tough job because there's so many pieces you want to put in, but you've got to be selective which ones you get, because it's got to be a nice mix. And it's tough.
Yeah, I know that's something that we struggle with the CWS show whenever it comes here, is just the limitations in space. You know, we have to say, like, okay, well, we want to show as many people as possible, but any more than 50 or so works, and things are going to be on top of each other. And we already, the show is hung at what I would consider to be basically maximum density this year.
Right.
I've got things a little closer to thermostats than I'd like to, or side molding, like doorways than I would, you know, in a perfect world, some walls that I might not even hang on, but we had to get everything up that we possibly could.
Well, it's good that you do make an effort to space them out, because I'm a firm believer. I've owned 2 art galleries, by the way. I believe the art should have its own little private space on a wall, not to be too jumbled together. But I know with the competition, and you do try to get as many as you can. Sometimes you do have to scrunch it just a little bit, that's totally acceptable. I've been in so many shows in my lifetime, and I've also been rejected from so many shows. Anytime you get a chance to be in a show, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Aside from just trying to keep the show balanced and trying to have a good representation of all variety of styles, are there any other challenges that you come upon when you're jurying, or specific challenges that you experience this year jurying?
I wouldn't refer to these so much as a challenge as much as criteria, because there are certain things I look for in a painting. And I've had a lot of people ask me, what do you look for when you're making your selections? And it goes way beyond just looking to see what is attractive as opposed to what I think is not attractive, or it doesn't appeal to me that much on a beauty basis, because they're all attractive. Every one of them in its own merit is attractive. So you've got to look beyond just how pretty the piece is. And you have to start looking at the composition, the artistic ability of the artist, the values, the perspectives, the color mixes. These are all things that go together to make a painting work. And
tastes are limiting.
Really all we do is we take brushes and we move paint around on paper.
Yeah.
But we all do it differently.
Right.
And then there's certain principles that we have been taught over the years that are almost necessary to make a piece work.
Right.
So I really do try to stick with that. I really do look at that and say, I know that started out with a blank piece of paper, but look at this artist did with that piece of paper. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Do you know offhand how many entries there were to the show? Like how many works you had to choose from when we picked the 50?
If I'm not mistaken, I think I had to choose like 70 or 65, something like that, I think. And there were several hundred, I believe, that I chose from. It's been a while back since I juried, but there were quite a few. I say at least 200, 250, something like that.
Okay, so yeah, something like a 25% acceptance rate. Were artists allowed to enter multiple works?
Do what now?
Were artists allowed for this show, I just don't recall, to enter multiple works?
They were, but they could only be selected one time. There were several artists that put 2 or 3 pieces in, and all 3 of the pieces were good. I chose what I thought was the best of the 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But each artist could only have 1 piece in that show, and which I think is a great way to do it. That's a great way to do it.
With a multi-artist show like this, I think it's really the only way. We do our member show every year, and we do it in the same way. We let people enter up to 3, but if you're in, you get in with 1.
Right.
You got to try and spread the wealth the best that you can.
Oh, exactly. And like I said, there's so many pieces to choose from, and so many of them are just really, really good paintings. And you want to give everybody an equal shot at getting in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any trends or things that you've noticed specifically about the body of work this year that were really exciting? Are there things that people are doing that's like, I don't know. Sometimes I'll look for things in a year when we get the members show, because it's the best. It's the best analogy that I have is, oh man, it was really peculiar this year. Everybody was out there with photography, and everybody was trying this specific kind of mounting style, and that was really interesting. Did you notice anything like that this year? Any themes or trends arising?
I didn't notice anything particular. One trend I noticed in a lot of shows, and I didn't see it so much on this one, is people try to stick with a color trend.
Oh,
You can watch these TV shows and you know what the trendy colors are by the way they're painting houses and the furniture and curtains they're buying. And a lot of times, I'll give you an example. Remember back when teal was the big thing. There were so many people incorporating teal into their paintings because it was
when was that? When was the teal era?
That must have been back before you were born.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking like modern contemporary, like when everybody's houses were chrome and teal and like that era.
Teal furniture, teal paintings. I went through that same phase. I was a realist at the time. Everything I painted had teal.
Okay.
It sold like hotcakes. But then the problem with trends is if you get caught in that rut where you're just trying to do what's trendy, that trend's going to eventually just wear itself out and something else takes over.
Right. And then you got to
change. You're stuck with a body of work that you can't give away because it's no longer trendy. But in this particular show, I didn't really see anybody sticking with specific trends. I was really impressed with the variety of work, techniques particularly, because we had everything from figurative work, we had abstract, realism, landscapes, florals, still lifes. I had it all, and it was such a great mix, and that just pleased me to a T. I'd like to see a good mix of things in a show.
Yeah. Is there something you think that water media allows for that other media do not? I know I had somebody asking a question they sent in via email about why an artist would choose to use water media over oil. What does that provide where you might not be able to do as easily with another media?
What I find, a lot of people just starting out like watercolor because it's very portable.
Okay.
It's easy to clean up. There aren't any problems with allergies to any kind of solvents or toxins or anything. It's a very safe medium, and it's also has a lot of advantages because you can apply it very quickly. It dries very quickly. Now, I started out as an oil painter years and years ago in Kansas City, and I would work on a piece. It would take, at least back in those days, it would take 4 or 5 weeks for that piece to dry.
Right.
And I can do a watercolor and go eat a sandwich and come back and it's dry. Or I can get my hair dryer out and dry it in 2 minutes. So that's a wonderful thing. I can just move on to the next step of that painting,
right,
without having to wait for it to set up. And I think that's why a lot of people nowadays, more and more, are taking watercolor classes. And I think they get into it thinking it's easy. It's not easy.
Speed does not equal easy. The speed of it actually makes it less forgiving.
I've done it all. I've done acrylics, oils, pastels, Conte, charcoal. I've done everything. Watercolors, in my opinion, is tougher to learn than all of those put together, because watercolor you got to think 2 steps ahead of what you're doing.
Right.
There's very little room for error. And this is why a lot of people get into it thinking it's going to be very easy. And it is very portable and easy to clean up, but it's a tough process to learn. I have a lot of respect for watercolor artists because they have paid their dues. They've gone through the learning process, which sometimes takes half a lifetime to do. And now they're putting their work out there to be judged. And I think that's a great thing. So my hat's off to all of you.
Yeah, there were definitely some certified masterworks in the show this year.
Absolutely.
Stuff that when you consider just how unforgiving a medium watercolor can be, the way in which some of this work is rendered, it's just outstanding. So one thing that I don't know if this is entirely unique to water media, but since I've gotten into the industry of art exhibitions and hanging shows and stuff, we don't work with too many arts societies or arts guilds, but we do have, ever since I've been here and through many, many shows, worked with water media societies and water media guilds. This is the Colorado Watercolor Society State Exhibition.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about do you know anything about the history of watercolor societies or why they arose in their popularity from the artist's perspective?
Actually, I don't know anything at all about the history, but I know they're very popular. Every state has one.
They are.
Most major cities have one.
Yeah.
A lot of communities have one, and a lot of retirement centers have one. It's something, everybody loves art. Everybody,
Like,
even people that don't paint, love and appreciate art. And like I said, watercolor is something that's just it's universal. It's easy to transport. It's easy to clean up. And there's so many people doing it these days. I can see why they will start forming these little collectives of other people that are interested in the same thing, and suddenly becomes a watercolor society of some type. And I think it's a great thing. Watercolor societies are a gold mine because not only do you have a place where you can gather around people that love and appreciate what you love and appreciate, but you can share ideas. And a lot of times, I mean, I used to belong to several watercolor societies years ago when I had time to do it. And I used to love going to the meetings. I used to love going to the demos and the workshops because I always met other people, and we would just get a conversation. And we could discuss different kinds of brushes, different kinds of paints, different brands of paper,
yeah.
different techniques, who's a good teacher, who's a bad teacher, whatever, you know. It's just it's a warehouse of information.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
really, anybody that doesn't belong to a society, in my opinion, should make every effort to become a member, even if you don't have that much time to give it a lot. But it is a great resource for artists who want to connect with other people that like the same thing they like. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I've really been coming around to the idea of art as a team sport over the past year, 2 years, been thinking more about it. We've been developing something called the Open Studio, which is a group that has been meeting regularly a couple of days a week up in our classroom, and talking to them and seeing the growth of those artists, really becoming aware of how beneficial that community aspect can be to improving people's work, pushing people and educating. You know, in a world where it's easier than ever to be really, really insular and say you're going to start a hobby and go online and dive into a message board or dive into YouTube and watch videos and teach yourself, there's still something that you just can't quite equal with that, comparing it to something like going to a meeting, going to a demo, a real life demo, and talking to somebody like yourself and really learning a technique or a skill or you know, any little thing that you can take away. It's just going to push you that much further. I think where I might have at one point been a little bit on the fence about it, I do think that having some sort of team aspect to the creation of your artwork can be really beneficial.
I think it can too. And I used to love when I was learning how to paint, I would go to one workshop a year. I would choose an artist whose work I admired, and I would see where they're teaching, and I would save up all year long to go to that one 5 or 6 day workshop, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, because we had a house payment and kids, and I wasn't grossly overpaid, so it was rare to find the money to do that. But that was my week of the year to do something just for me. Vacations always were for the kids. You know, we always spent the vacation doing what they wanted, but I needed that time to really pursue my art. And I would go to a workshop, and I was like a sponge. I learned as much from the person sitting next to me in the workshop as I did from the instructor sometimes, because we all went out and had lunch together. We had dinner together. We shared notes. There was a lot of laughing, a lot of good times. It was a great thing. I really miss taking workshops. I think they're wonderful.
Yeah, I can really relate to that idea of learning just as much from your other student, your peer, as
Yeah.
you do from the teacher. I started doing kickboxing recently, Muay Thai, and I'm just so green at it that I learn so much from, like, even the guy that's just holding the bag for me. Like, anybody says a thing, it's new to me. So I'm just like you said, I'm just a sponge for it.
Well, I did that same thing. I took Kyokushinkai, which is a full contact karate, for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I had my nose broken twice and some ribs. That was all I wanted. But it's a tough thing. But again, it's being around people that love the same thing you love, even if it's something like that. It's just great.
It's no different.
That's your time to do something for you.
Yeah,
And art club is great for that.
absolutely. I want to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
Now, we just gushed about how wonderful art societies are.
Right.
There are some downsides that I could see. And the number one I would be concerned about if I was like trying to coach somebody who is getting into their art career, I would say you need to be aware, if you are attending classes and you are being around other people, that you try to avoid your work becoming somehow derivative or an imitation of your instructor or your peers.
Yep.
What are the best ways to avoid that? if you had to ask?
You talking about as a student or how to
I would
encourage
say,
people?
yeah, I would say as an artist in general, how do you find your own niche? You know, how, if you're constantly around other people in this wonderful atmosphere that's pushing you to be
Right.
better and better, how do I not just start, you know, throwing punches and kicks exactly the way the other guy does?
Well, this is something I run across as a workshop instructor because everybody likes to try to copy the teacher. And I know why, because for a while I did the same thing until I was chastised for doing that. But I thought I was supposed to.
Embarrassment. That's how
Yeah,
you learn.
I thought I was supposed to paint what the teacher painted. And I'm not going to mention names, but a teacher walked by one day and he said, "You can get in a lot of trouble copying my paintings." And I said, "I thought I was supposed to, because I just watched you do it. I thought I was supposed to do it too." He said, "No, you paint your own painting. That's my painting."
Yeah.
So it was embarrassing, but it was a good lesson. I learned right then about copyright, and I lecture about copyright in my workshops.
Oh,
But
okay.
what I teach, I mean, the techniques, most art techniques are pretty universal. You know,
Right.
there's only so many ways you can move paint around with a brush. Only so many ways you can mix colors.
Right.
It's what you do with those that distinguish you as the artist. And I really try to encourage people at any skill level. You know, we can all look at the same tree, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 100 different ways we can paint that tree. And I'll give you another example. Let's just say there's a local landmark in your community that everybody in the world paints, and they all paint it the same way. They paint it to look like the photograph. They're a dime a dozen. You see them everywhere. You could take that same landmark and do something totally creative with it, where people will still recognize what it is, but use really bizarre colors. Use really strong values. You know, change the background shapes a little bit. There's a
Sure.
million things you can do
Foreshorten.
to make your
Yeah.
work stand out.
Yeah.
And my philosophy is, you know, you'd much rather be the artist that everybody tries to copy than the one that copies everybody else.
Yeah.
So be
100%.
the artist, everybody tries to copy. Be the one that does something different enough that your work rises to the top and it stands out. That's really how you make it. Your name as an artist, I believe.
Yeah. I think you go to a workshop and you don't think about it like if you were cooking, you're not thinking about learning a whole bunch of recipes and
Right.
memorizing a whole bunch of recipes. You go into a workshop to learn how to saute, how to cut vegetables. You're learning a series of techniques that you can then go apply to whatever it is you would like to cook. You're learning a series of brush strokes, color mixing, applications, things that you can then go to apply to your own art. You're not going to a workshop to learn a recipe for
Right.
producing an Edwards, right? Like that's not why you're there.
Yeah, you can stay home with a cookbook and cook the recipe.
Right.
Exactly. But you're
Right.
going to the workshop to see how that instructor, like you said, how they do the dicing, how they do this, the timing, when they do this, when
Yeah.
they do that. And that's all paint is. You know, when you work wet, when you work dry, when you put
Mm-hmm.
your darks in, where do you leave your whites? These are all things that you can learn from somebody watching them do it. But then when you take your subject matter and you can apply the same principles, but just do a little bit, do it your own way. You can
Yeah.
exaggerate the angles and shapes. There's a lot of things you can do to make it unique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me see. See if I got any questions emailed in here. This one, I don't have who this question's from. I just copy and pasted it out of an email. Has to do with why you selected the pieces you did for awards. What was it about the paintings that perhaps grabbed your attention and led to both your subjective and objective criteria for awards? Many thanks ahead of time for providing insight re your selections regarding. We'll miss not seeing you in person this year.
I miss that too.
Yeah.
I would love to have been there.
I always liked the feature of you guys jurying the awards from real life. I thought that was that's a really good thing. So yeah, can you speak to that a little bit? So you've selected 50 works that are going to be in the show,
Right.
and they're on the wall, and you've come in, and now it's time to pick. For this show, it was 11. Maybe it's less awards. What are the things that grab you? I'm just restating.
Well, first place, the fact they got in the show means they at some point grabbed me to one degree or another.
Right.
They're in the show. But when I do the awards, I try to stick to the same criteria. I'm mixing it up like I did when I selected pieces for the initial hanging. I try to mix it up to where there's not too many of one style. For example, if there's can be 12 awards and I pick 9 landscapes, That's not going to sit right with a lot of people, and rightfully so.
Right,
So
just like the overall body of work for the show.
like the overall body of work. So I really try to pick the pieces I think are really good representational pieces of that particular style that I want to represent in that show as an award. And it might be an abstract, it might be a piece of pinpoint realism. It could be, I mean, good art is good art. And the way I look at it is I don't care what style it is or what subject it is, good art stands on its own merit. And a good piece is just a good piece. And if it's a piece that I can use as an award winner, that's going to give me a chance to also fill in another slot in that list of criteria that I use for mixing it up, then that's kind of a win-win. And a lot of times people will look at a piece and say, well, yeah, I like that one over there better. Why'd this one get this award? But again, in this, I've got to use an example that I ran across years ago. A good friend of mine in North Carolina, he'd been trying for years to win awards and shows, contacted me one day, and we went out and just talked. He was just really bummed out because he said, I just got rejected from another show. And he took his phone out and showed me the piece that he did. It was a beautiful painting. And he was ready just give up painting. He said, I've had it. I'm going to just quit. And what I said, it's a good piece. Put it in some other show. Well, he didn't want to do that. He finally did about 2 or 3 months later, and he won an award in a national show somewhere else. So it's the juror. It wasn't the painting. It's the juror.
It is subjective, no matter how badly we want it to be fair or the honest decision, the obvious decision. It's going to be subjective no matter what we do. So it's all more important to not get downhearted if you do get rejected by one juror.
It is one of the first things I look at when I go through these images. I got them on my computer. I do a real quick pass through at every one of them, and I'm looking to see what really grabs my attention. Some pieces, for some reason, they just grab you, and you make a note of that piece, and you keep clicking away, looking at more, then another one grabs you. Like I said, they're all beautiful. They're beautiful pieces of art, but some of them make a real dynamic first impression. And that's not the only criteria that you use, but that definitely is getting you off to the right start. Your painting there's something about your piece that grabbed that juror's attention. It might have been the colors, it might have been the subject, it might have been the perspective, it might have been the style. In other words, there's just something about it that juror, whatever he or she is, was just taken by that piece. So what I try to do, and I take my own advice. When I enter competition, sometimes if I have time to do it, I try to put a piece in that's a good example of what I can do, but I try to put a piece in that's just different enough that it'll grab that juror's first attention.
Totally. I put this in the list of criterion for our member show. I put in a line that says original content or something to that or original subject matter. I forget how I worded it, but it's basically to say, like, if I have a show and I'm looking, like you said, you're making your first pass, and I've gone through clicking, flower, trees, mountain, flower, guy cleaning an octopus, right? All of a sudden, it's on your radar, and it's just a fact that a human being is going to be looking at this work. So I'm not saying that this is the only way to get into a show. It's just like a little bit of a hack. If you consider, especially a show like this, where there's 200 plus people entering, if you do something just a little bit out of the ordinary, it's going to give you a leg up to get noticed. And it's also going to mean that you don't have to compete against 15 other people that painted me pictures of flowers. I say this to folks all the time. Like, if you enter an art show in Colorado and your subject matter is nature, whew, you have put yourself up against a stiff set of competition, because you can only choose so many nature landscapes for your show. Like you're saying, you try and provide a variety. And for an educational art center like us, we're not a gallery that lives and dies by selling artwork. I'm trying to provide people with the most interesting experience possible. I have to try and keep their experience varied if they're going to be looking at 60 different works while they're here.
Well, they do, and you hit the nail on the head. And nothing I say is written in stone. This is just my opinion, but it's based on experience, years of experience. I have juried shows in the past, not this one, but shows in the past where 80% of the pieces that came in were landscapes. But there were also some abstracts and florals. There were figurative. There were portraitures. There were animal paintings. There were just a variety of things, still lifes. there were so many genres, but 80% of the pieces, roughly 80%, were all landscapes, and every one of them was a nice landscape.
Sure.
But if I'm going to be a fair, non-partial juror, I can only choose so many landscapes. So if you put in a landscape, and I can only choose 9 landscapes for that show, and there's 160 of them submitted, your chances of getting selected just drop down to 0.5% of getting into that show. You see what I'm saying? And it sounds cruel.
I advocate for the same thing. I say it all the time.
Yeah, it sounds cruel, but it's just a fact. I can only choose so many of each genre.
Right. Yeah. And
but if you do a landscape, there's so many things you can do to make yours stand out from the others. Totally. It's still a landscape, but now your piece is more original. It's more controversial.
The genre or subject matter is not the beginning and the end of it. It's not that you chose a landscape and now you're done for. Right. It's right. There are ways to do it for sure that you can try and stand out.
And I have to use Wolf Kahn. Wolf Kahn recently passed away, but Wolf Kahn was one of my heroes. Mm-hmm. Wolf Kahn will do these gigantic canvas pieces. I saw one of his at a museum in Georgia. And the second I walked in the door, I knew that was a Wolf Kahn painting. It must have been 100 feet away from me. But he did a barn. It just showed one end of a barn. That barn was hot pink. The sky was green. The grass was purple. And the trees were orange.
Yeah.
And I noticed the second I walked in that door from across that museum, that was a Wolf Kahn painting.
Yeah.
Because he was so unique in the way he handled color. So that just made the biggest impression on me as far as just the importance of doing something really different to get that first initial impression from people.
Absolutely. I'm going to move on to the next question here is for me. Eriq, could you please comment on your job as a curator and how you decide to hang a show? What a difficult process it must be. And how do you go about arranging the particular paintings in the allotted space that's available to showcase each and every selected painting? Okay. It varies from show to show, obviously. I get all of the work in and I sit it all on the ground. I lean it all up against the walls. And you walk around and then you start to see. So one way, if you're feeling really overwhelmed and you've got a lot of work to hang, one method is to start grabbing the really large showstopper pieces, the pieces that are incredibly eye-catching and usually pretty big. And you start to see just by space alone what walls they're going to fit on the best. And then they kind of become the anchor points for where the rest of the work is going to fall in. And I've been here so long, I've been at Foothills Art Center for over 6 years now. I know which are the walls that fit big work the best. So there's spaces in both galleries, and you can start to set the larger works in position. And then you can start to decide, do I want to create some sort of theme to a room? I've done things like where everything on a wall is black and white, or everything on a wall, this is the portrait wall, or this is the room where everything's got a little bit of blue in it. You can start to see, and I haven't come upon a show yet where I'm completely stumped. It's just certain rhythms and themes start to arise. One of my favorite walls I've ever hung was in the members show just this past year that just closed, was 2 walls at a corner and got some really, really large pieces. I think it was 5 or 6. And there was nothing at all similar about these works, except they all had really, really deep blacks. They were all unabashedly using this incredibly dark black. And when you put all 5 or 6 of them next to each other, it's just like when a shirt matches your eyes, the color comes out, and they all were built up. There was a synergy between those 6 works. So when you can make something like that happen, rather than having 2 pieces on a wall that compete with each other, or one work overshadows another, that's really what you're going for. So I don't know. I hope that answers your question. I think it would be best to just come and do a ride along with me when I lay a show out and just listen to me bloviate about why something is going somewhere. I don't know if that would give anybody a better idea. Anybody want to do that, you're welcome to come do that sometime. Stop in and we can talk about the intricacies of hanging a show.
It's a lot of work. I've done some shows.
Yeah.
It is a job. I commend you for that. I wouldn't have the patience these days or the time to do it. It's a time-consuming affair.
Yeah, it's something I didn't even know was a job until I started doing it. What's a preparator do? I was a cook for many years before I came to Foothills, and I was ready to be a teacher and work in classrooms and teach art. And then I started getting into exhibitions, and now it's my favorite thing. And I got this great tattoo. I don't know if so now I'm locked in. I've got I am a picture hanger. So yeah, well, I hope that answers your question. I forget who sent that one in, but okay, so we're a little more than halfway through here. I wouldn't mind, unless anybody else in chat has some other questions, you can throw them in the Q&A section of your software, and we'll be sure to answer those. Also, make sure you click on the link that I posted in the chat for our YouTube channel and subscribe. If you guys y'all in the chat don't have any other questions for us, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at some specific works in the show. And I just would love to hear you talk about them a little bit more specifically.
Sure.
If you give me 1 second. Here it comes. I'm looking at Cindy Brabeck King's piece. You seeing this one of those pillows?
Yes, that piece I believe was best of show, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. I think it's why I selected it. And
right.
And this one, guys in the chat, if you have not come and seen in real life, this is one of those anchor point pieces for sure. Just fantastically rendered. I'll let you take it away, Sterling.
It's a beautiful piece, and that's one of those pieces, like I said, that just made just a dynamic first impression. There are so many things I can say about this piece that just scream best of show. And I can't point, of course, but one thing I'm looking at, if you look at that large white pillow, the way it's positioned in the composition of the piece is just right on. And it's got the yellow pillow right in front of it. There's so much dimension and so much depth, and I cannot imagine how many centuries it took to paint that piece.
This piece, Cindy Brabeck King. No one knows she's actually a vampire. And she's been alive for many centuries.
I cannot imagine what it took to paint that. I mean, literally every stitch of embroidery is, or maybe it's beadwork, but it's every piece is just beautiful. And looking at it very closely, it's not just the color; it's also got the shading in between the pieces. The rope tassels around the edge of the pillows.
But my goodness, there's a shadow cast.
I know the shadows. I mean, just this piece is. I don't know the artist, but I think whoever he or she is, you were an extraordinary artist. I commend you to the highest level. I think it's a beautiful piece. And when I was doing my first pass, going through the paintings very quickly and making my first run through, that piece just grabbed me first thing. After I do that first run through, I've got a list of numerous pieces that got my first impression. Then I go back, I do a very serious look at them. I look at everything else again too, but I do a very serious look at the ones that get the first pass. And I'm looking for composition, values, technical skills. There's so many things I look for that these are the things that make a painting work. That one has it all. It is just, I've never seen anything like it. It's just, it's not the fact it's very detailed. It's what you did with the detail. The color selections are drop dead gorgeous. The composition's good. The values are good. The shadows are good. I mean, everything is just working in that painting. I think it's just a wonderful piece of art.
One thing I'm incredibly impressed about with this work, and because one thing I'm a sucker for, or I'm very hateful about, are flat works. I'm always telling people to try and build more depth into their art. And one thing that makes it difficult to build depth is when you have a great deal of saturation and a great deal of detail all throughout, as I zoom out, all throughout the work. And somehow there's still enough control and a deftness with the media to still build depth even with all of that. And that, to me, I think is the most impressive thing about the work.
I have no doubt that piece in real life is probably much more eye-catching than the photograph. The photograph itself is beautiful. I'm sure the real piece is just mesmerizing.
It's pretty outstanding. Pretty outstanding.
Good job.
All right, let's move on to the next. I have no idea what the next piece is, but I'm going to click. Oh, I thought this was a really interesting landscape. I thought this had a lot of personality, so I wanted to hear your take on this one.
It does have personality, and what I like about this piece, and I was talking about doing something original, and there's a lot of waterfalls and springs and rushing water paintings, and just about every show I jury. It's a very popular topic. But this was done in such a very creative way. I like the way that the artist, he or she,
Jeremy Jones.
Well, even went so far as to put the shadows on the rocks in the foreground of the rushing water.
Sure.
But this thing is it's a treasure trove of technique, of patterns, of light and dark. When the values are good, the negative shapes are good. It has so much movement to it. The background foliage at the top of the painting, all the leaves, that is so beautiful the way it's kind of scumbled in. A lot of negative painting up in that area. It's obviously done by a very skilled artist. Very skilled artist.
Yeah, I didn't notice that negative painting, but that's pretty apparent now that I'm looking at the way the gaps in the foliage is done here. That blue is likely painted over the top, huh?
It looks like it might have been possibly, or it's hard to see from a photograph. But if it wasn't, it was painted blue and the green was painted on top. But it's just a beautiful piece. Everything about that painting is just captivating, and it's one of these pieces that the more you look at, the more you see. And I find pieces like that fascinating. It's obviously a landscape. It falls in the landscape category.
But it's not in landscape orientation.
Yeah.
It's in portrait orientation, just to be clever.
It's definitely a nice piece, very nice piece.
Yeah, I think aside from the movement, which you mentioned, one of my favorite things about this piece is the way, the kind of the layout and the cropping, the way your eye moves from background to foreground, the way in which, I don't know if this is true, but there's sort of a fisheye effect that's going on. Like, and by true, I mean, I don't know if this was accurate to the scene the artist was painting, but there's a bend to this tree that lends itself so nicely to both the stones and the flow of the water. And I just think it gives the whole thing just a really, really nice context.
Well, it does. I mean, everything has a curvilinear dominance, whether it be the rocks or the trees, the water, everything. It's just a beautiful balance. It's the same design concept as far as circles and ovals and things like that, but they're juxtaposed against each other so beautifully. And again, that's one of those pieces. Your first impression is, wow, that's really different. I like that.
Yeah.
And then you start digging deeper. Then you start seeing all the reflections in the rocks. And you start seeing all the little things like the light coming through the trees at the top. It's a pleasure to look at.
Yeah, and you could have cut it off. You could have cut it off right here. I mean, it would be weird to see it as a perfect square, but like still really strong. And then to finish, I don't know if this was the order it was painted. It probably wasn't, but I think the foreground here is just so captivating. I am not even really clear on why this design pattern is occurring. I don't know if this is actual, probably not. Maybe I think it's probably just the representation of the water, what it's doing to the sunlight as it ripples through and hits the stones at the bottom of the stream bed. But man, did that really grab my eye when I hung it. I just love it.
It's very interpretive, and also the colors. If you look at those rocks in the foreground under the water, look at that splash of purple on the top of those rocks, right in there. See that?
Yeah.
That little splash of purple, and it's kind of echoed in a few places elsewhere. But that's a very interpretive piece. I interpret that as just the light dancing off the rocks just because of the moving water.
Right.
Most people would just paint just a bunch of rocks.
How are you?
I would just paint a bunch of rocks.
Totally.
I would never thought of doing something like that.
How on earth do you take your paintbrush and render that phenomenon? It's like asking somebody to paint heat waves. You know, like how are you going to show me that still that it's going to read as you want it to?
Yep.
A real asset for sure. Beautiful work. I don't know if we're going to get through all 6 here before we hit 1 hour, but we'll cruise. This is now a completely different take, but it's another landscape, and I chose it because I think there's just something very elegant about it that I wanted to hear your take.
This made a great first impression, and because I've for years was a landscape artist. This is a very, very loose landscape. It's a very limited palette. The light in this piece is just right on. And sometimes you see a painting that you just feel like you're actually standing right there. And that piece, I feel like I'm standing right there. I think it's just beautiful. Like I said, the limited palette, the values are beautifully handled. Where the foreground rocks, of course, are much darker. Then they got that beautiful light on the top of the lake, looking at the distant horizon. There's so many things about that piece. It has a sense of place. You want to be there, and that's one of the reasons that's what first grabbed me. But then on further examination, I was able to really look at the reflections in the water, if you look at the water coming along the shoreline in the foreground, the way it's kind of just very erratic, the way it kind of comes into those small rocks. Now scroll down a little bit, right in there. See that? How pretty that is?
Mm-hmm.
It just has you can feel the water moving. You can actually feel it. There's just so many wonderful things about that piece.
But yeah, talk about judicious, right? The use of such limited brushstrokes,
Right.
Not a really broad palette, but just this done ever so carefully. We zoom out, it's almost impressionist.
It is, and this is the kind of painting also it'd be very easy to mess up.
Heck yeah.
If you go in there and start making it too detailed or trying to get too fancy with it, you would lose that freshness. That is the most beautiful fresh watercolor, and like I think it was beautifully rendered. That's a fantastic job.
Absolutely, yeah, I love it. I love it too. I clicked a second early there, but we're gonna go on to. I wanted to bring a. This is K Moore. I wanted to bring an abstract in front of you just to hear about the way in which I think it's difficult to talk about and to critique abstracts. So I'm always really interested in getting a very experienced person's words about it.
One thing I look for with an abstract, and not everybody does this, but I guess it's the teacher in me. I look for a center of interest, and I look for a well-placed center of interest. That dark gray area down in the lower right, it's just, to me, just looks like a very, very strong center of interest right in there, that dark with the orange streak across it.
Here. Here.
But I'm also looking at the way that the artist saved the white paper, which, as we all know, is hard to do, especially with an abstract, because abstracts, a lot of times, you're using very big brushes and very quick brush strokes, and it's important to save that white paper. And I think these little spots of white peeking out are beautiful, and they're in the right places. They really accentuate that gray center of interest. But what really attracted me to this piece more than anything was the very softness of it. It has a very soft look. It's obviously abstract expressionism, which I think is really beautiful. And for those who have never tried abstract expressionism, let me tell you right now, it's not as easy as people think it is. I've been working at it for years, and I've never in my life tried to paint anything that's as difficult as an abstract expressionist painting. Because you're not copying something, you're creating something. This is coming right out of the brain. You might look at something as a reference, but then you do a very abstract interpretive rendering of it or interpretation. It's not easy. And I think this is a beautiful piece as far as balance, the colors, the softness, those little spots of white. They're all different sizes, different shapes. It just has a wonderful, wonderful abstract feel to it. And it's a very well done painting. Very well done.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of what I call an abstract work with a backbone, where it looks like they knew when to stop because they made something and they didn't just cover the paper. And a lot of times for me, that seems to arise in a work that has form rendered in there in the abstract. And I know, especially in abstract expressionism, there's a lot of what they call all over painting, which is where you end up with something that's pretty flat and you have to try and build your form in other ways. This painting, like you said, reserves the white. It shows a good center of interest, and it even rendered form in a very soft way there, because there aren't very many hard lines in this whole piece, but just using different tonality. I don't know if, can you see my cursor? I'm pointing at it.
Yep.
Okay, so you can see, lighter plane here, darker plane here, and it builds a corner and it builds a top, and then things arise out of that, and lighter bits, and then you get down to the, your eye just wants to believe whatever's lower in the page is also closer to you. So you pick a very well saturated, solid plane, and that steps in front of everything else, and you build a darker area behind it, and it builds a shadow which pulls this plane even further forward. I think those decisions and things all being made on the fly, like you said, with nothing to reference, no recipe.
Right.
you don't even know what the flavor of it's going to be. And I think that's always really impressive to come out.
It is. And like I said, abstract is not easy to do. And
No.
I evolved into abstract about 5 years ago. And quite honestly, this artist, I think she said her name, her name was Kay.
Kay Moore.
She has a great eye for abstract design, but it is hard to know when to get out. We always think we can make them just a little bit better, then we look at it and say, I wish I hadn't done that. This artist has great discipline, and I truly admire that.
Sure. Absolutely. Let's look at one more before we sign off here. Sterling, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Oh, I've enjoyed this.
Okay.
That's an interesting piece. What's the brushes is an interesting piece, and that piece had that first impression, grab you look to it. The values, that black background is so striking on this. And I also like the use of color, a lot of very earthy, kind of muted colors. What really struck me the most about this whole painting, aside from the fact that it's very well done, is that little small brush in the upper right-hand corner. Because if you look at the brushes, the three brushes that come down from the center down towards the lower left, you can almost draw a straight line from the bottom of those brushes to the corner of that paper.
Here.
It's just a very straight line.
Yes.
But then that little small brush, they kind of got stuck in the middle, totally disrupted that line. And which I think is just a fantastic compositional tool. Now, when I jury shows, one thing I do look for is when there's too many tangents, everything kind of lines up on the same line. That's a painting that I think there's not a tangent there, but I think the artist, had he or she not been aware of what they were doing, they could have easily had just a big angle going right across their painting.
Right, and have all the brushes lined up in a row.
Right, as it is. They're not exactly lined up exactly. And then a little small brush in the middle kind of pulls the eye back up. And then the one on the far right pulls your eye right back down again. I think that was just beautiful. That's a beautiful, beautiful way to present it. The textures are good, the colors are good, the values are good. It's a very nice piece.
Yeah, I think the use of. Do you think this is some kind of absorption technique to create this speckling here? Is this like a salt technique?
It's hard to say. I mean, it could be salt. It could be just a little bit of splatter and wiping, which I do sometimes. There's so many products out there nowadays that do create different effects, but it definitely works. And one thing I've done before is I'll wet an area. When it's dry, I'll wet it, and put a little bit of color on it while that color's still wet. Charge a real heavy body of color into it, and then quickly blot it and wipe it off. It leaves a nice little stain. It could be something like that. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, they did it quite well.
It represents the rust really well.
It does.
Yeah, and I think the use of the blues and the purples and the shadows is a really interesting choice. You know, this work almost is one of the more realistic, straight up realistic renderings in the show, but there's still some very interesting choices made in terms of the colors.
Yep.
You know,
nice,
yeah, it's just great, just great. So. Well, Sterling, I just want to thank you so much for your time. It was really a pleasure. We kept our audience almost entirely throughout this entire thing, and I think that's a win in and of itself. We started with 35, and we're ending here with 32. Does anybody, before we sign off, have any questions? Any of you guys still watching want to get your questions in the last moment here? Just use that Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. I'll give you 30 seconds or so to try and type something in before we sign off. Again, thank you guys all so much for being here. This is just one piece of content in many that we're going to try and bring to people, knowing that it's harder and harder to get out these days and get into situations where you're in the public. I'm just getting lots of thank yous. That's good. Thank you guys so much. And, you know, so if you want to watch this again, or if you want to look for more content like this in the future, just go to our YouTube channel. I'm going to post that link again in the chat here. Please do go and subscribe. Oh, is Sterling's workshop going to happen in August?
That's the $64,000 question right now. I'm certainly hoping it does. Let me tell you this. This sounds like a real suck up, and I'm being honest with you. I love Colorado. We love Denver. In fact, my wife and I have been out there numerous times. I've taught there numerous times. And quite frankly, if I didn't have 9 grandkids and 4 daughters living on the East Coast, we'd be living in Denver. We love it out there. So I'm hoping I do get back to Denver. So I'd like to have a chance to meet you, Eric, and just kick a few things around. But I'm really hoping that workshop does come to fruition. A lot of it's conditional on the virus, of course, just like it is here in North Carolina.
Yeah.
We
Is
don't know
there
how
a
bad
is
it
there a
is.
website people can check to
Uh,
be aware, or should they just look for CWS emails? Or
I would just look for the CWS because that's the only thing I have is information that I'm given by them. We keep our website up to date. And if you go to my website, look at workshop, you can see that listing. And as of right now, the workshop is still scheduled. If something comes up, then we will immediately put it on the website.
what's your website? I'll put that in the chat too for people.
It's at sterlingedwards.com, www.sterlingedwards.com. And we just got through updating, putting our 2021 workshops on there too. But the one in Denver is, as of right now, I'm still scheduled to go, and I'm really keeping my fingers crossed. I would love to come back out there.
Yeah, it would be a real pleasure to meet you for certain. I would like that very much.
Well, I would like to also thank everybody that joined us tonight. It was a great show. I was very honored to jury it. It is a big honor. I know there's lots of other people you could ask, and anytime I get selected to jury a show, I take that as a very, very high honor, and I take it very seriously. So I want to commend everybody that put a piece in. Whether your piece is accepted or not, you put a piece in. Without people like you, this wouldn't happen.
I say that all the time. It'd just be me in an empty room.
Exactly. So I certainly commend everybody that did, and hopefully I'll get a chance to meet some of you if I make it out there.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you all. Thank you all so much. I hope to meet you in real life one day, Sterling. It really was a pleasure. I feel like I learned so much from these conversations. I love learning how to talk about art more and more in depth. And it's always great to have another person's perspective. So thank you guys all for being here, and thank you guys for taking the time. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. Everybody have a wonderful evening. And
thank you, Eriq. I appreciate your work.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one, and stay in touch.
All right.